Kurt, the big horse. How are you, brother?
Good, brother. Good to be here, mate.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you on and welcome to the Sentient Savage podcast.
Thank you, mate. Great to be here.
Kurt, now I've wanted to have you on for a little while, man, and for multiple reasons. One, because I think you've had an absolute fantastic career working with athletes and teams right across the world, but also your I don't know, maybe you could say unconventional way of combining breath with strength.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, I look. I've spent a lot of time around the world, mate, and I used to think that you had to fit into a bit of a box when I was a bit younger, Seth, but I never did, and so yeah, I decided to sort of take it a bit around the world, mate, and see where it was going to take me, and sort of enjoy the journey a bit more rather than the more conventional way of going about things. So, but yeah, we can dive into that a bit more if you like, mate. Where would
Because
you like me to start?
yeah, with that, I mean, I suppose people should know what you are, or in the traditional sense, would you say a strength and conditioning coach? I think most people know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, a strength and conditioning coach. I like to call myself a high performance coach,
That sounds
because
better.
I touch on more than just your physical aspects of performance, and so I like to touch on the mental, emotional, spiritual side of performance as well as the physical. But strength and conditioning coach is always a nice place to start, and then move from there. It's a more comfortable place to start, mate, than and then go from there rather than freaking people out too much sometimes.
Yeah. And funny that, right? Because that strength and conditioning is a place to start. When I look at my journey, I suppose, of self development, it starts with strength and conditioning. It starts with physical aspects of wanting to be better, to be more active, to be fitter, to look sharper, more aesthetic, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think that element of training to want to, I suppose, level up is not a bad thing at all. I think it's really positive. And as long as you don't get caught up in, I suppose, the vanity of that sometimes comes with going to the gym or fitness, but focus on that more maybe performance aspect of it or wanting to continue developing. That's it really hooked me in. That was something that really got me in my early years.
Yeah, and that's where most people start, Seth. And I think it's because it's so easy to see, and it's so tangible. You can easily see the changes. Whereas something like maybe your mind, it's not as easy to see, or it's not as tangible to do. It's like you can't pick up a barbell and then see, oh, you feel a bit tired after. So it's a little bit harder to do that with, say, something like your mind. But I think that's where everyone tends to start, and especially as young men, Seth. The first thing we want to do is like, oh, I want to look better, I want to get ripped, and I want to get bigger and stronger, and in that sense, in the more egoic sense of being, which nothing wrong with that, as you touched on before, Seth. But in the bigger aspect of performance, speaking just purely in performance side of things, it all needs to come together. Um, to ultimately give you the best performance that you can. Uh, and so, yeah, you can't have one without the other, Seth. You can be super strong, nice and big, strong and fast, but if you walk out, walk out onto the pitch or onto the oval, and are worried about your opponent, then you've already lost.
Mm,
And so it's all got to come together.
mm. And I agree with you so much. I haven't had a lot of experience in sports, to be honest. I did when I was a kid. I played when I was really young. I played basketball for a number of years. And then I got into martial arts quite early. So I got into Zendu karate, which is like a mixed martial art. More so in a traditional sense. It's not MMA, but it is a karate and a mixed martial arts style. And I did that for a number of years, 10 years or so, and finished up that in my late teens, and then didn't really play sport. I mean, kicking the footy with mates or mucking around a little bit. And I was fit at that point. And I've spoken about my journey with kind of weight loss and body image and that sort of thing in an earlier episode. So just plugging that if people are interested. Um, but yeah, didn't really, not in a sports sense. And then it wasn't until later in my life that I realized, well, just because I'm not playing a sport doesn't mean I don't want to be able to perform. Right? Like life demands all sorts of things, and there's lots of different challenges that you need to be ready for. And it was more so that that evolved my thinking to, oh, maybe I should be thinking a little bit more outside the square than just bicep curls. There's I need to be doing some other things here.
Yeah, nice, Seth. And that's a good mindset to come to be honest. And it's that sort of, as it does with all things in life, that changes and shifts the way you go about things. But having that sort of mindset obviously opens you up to a greater level of being and a greater level of training and a greater opportunity to develop and pull that into your life, really, as opposed to just, hey, it looks like this, or hey, I want to get out of the bed fresh. Hey, I don't want to be sore when I, do these physical activities. Or hey, I want to be able to, have my mind prepped and ready to go for this meeting at work. So it all pulls in, and that's the sort of mindset that'll help shift it and get you there in that sense, Tal, with the sorry, mate. So with your training set. So um, I reckon with that, mate, it all sort of comes down to that mindset and your intent with training, just like with anything in life. It's your intent on what you want to get out of it, Seth.
Mm,
And and uh, and that's what I ask people when I first work with them. It's like, what do you want to get out of this, and why do you want to do this? And and that will guide everything. That'll guide how I go about working with them, because there's no point me wanting them to be a certain way or do a certain thing when they have a completely different mindset or a completely different feel of it. And so
mm,
meeting them where they're at, seeing where their intent is, and then flowing from there. That's how I tend to work with everybody and my athletes, even
mm.
them, Seth, and meeting them where they're at, and then slowly shifting from there.
Mm, mm. Because, and just to paint this picture for people, you work with a spectrum of people, from the absolute weapons like me, who are just killing it in every aspect, to some of those athletes that are winning gold medals. So it's such a broad spectrum of people. People who are out there really playing and competing as their job. That's what they do. They need to be able to perform highly. And yeah, it'd be interesting, I think, just to hear a bit more about your experience working with, high performance athletes, because I'm certainly a little naive to that world. And perhaps some of the listeners are too. But yeah, just explaining what that's like, maybe who you've worked with as an example, would be really cool to dive in with.
Yeah, nice, Seth. And I think I'm going to take it right back, Seth, to just how my journey started, mate, because we
Please. Yeah,
skipped
let's
over
do
that
that.
skipped over that at the start a little bit, mate. And so my when I was young, I always wanted to get the best out of myself. So when I was even in even in primary school, high school, transitioning, I always wanted to get the best out of myself. Now that may have been coming from a little bit of place of obviously definitely ego, because at that stage, I was a little bit chubby. I had my puppy fat on me when I was younger, and I had lower self confidence and lower self love because of that. And
Mm,
so, look, I wanted to get the best out of myself. Um, Not necessarily lean up, but that was sort of always at the back of my mind, and always a limiting factor for me. But it sort of held me up, put me on this journey, and so that was my intention when I was younger. So I would do things. I'd have a heart rate monitor when I was 12, 14 years old, going for runs. and was interested in looking at that sort of stuff all the way back then. And as you know, mate, like I grew up in quite a spiritual household with my mum teaching us how to breathe and meditate when we were kids. And from that, I really took to that. And I, once again, with that, in that area, I really wanted to get the best out of myself there and improve and be the best, human I could be, and learn about breathing and meditating and how I could shift my life and my energy in that sense as well. And so combining the two, I like most West Aussies would start off in football. And so after I finished playing football, I went straight into coaching, S&C coaching there. And quite simply, Seth, I built up from the Colts team to a senior team, and I could see if I sat in that system that I would bide my time and I'd eventually end up somewhere like the Eagles, Dockers, as I had a pathway mainly into the Dockers at the time.
Mm.
And I felt that I could sit there, I could do my time 2, 3, 4 years. I'd eventually get there if I wanted to. But to me, I really remember in that moment just being like, is that sort of all there is? It doesn't seem like there's a lot. And what am I? I'm probably about 22, 23 at the time. And so, the goal was to always work in that sport, always work in, footy. That was the dream. But I remember just being like, that doesn't seem very exciting. And
Mm.
then that's sort of it to a certain degree. I'm sort of there. And so I actually gave up my job. I quit at the end of the year and went and did a 3-year paid internship not paid internship, sorry, mate. I paid to go over to the USA, Phoenix, Arizona, at a place called Altus.
Mm.
And that was a private track and field training center. And so spent 3 months over there and absolutely loved it. And that was the first time really that I saw how a holistic training environment could be put together. So that was the first time I saw the athletes doing breathing on the side. That was the first time I saw them really hitting, near all the parts of performance and putting it together in such a way that was easy, that was really athlete centered. And why I wanted to go do that is because I had nothing to do with athletics. I knew nothing about athletics. That was completely out of my comfort zone. I was so far from football and team sport that,
Mm.
I just wanted to learn. And, I came away thinking, wow, like this is possible. Because to that point, I just saw in these systems that they were just so head driven, so I guess so masculine driven, but there was no heart in these programs. So
Mm.
especially at some football clubs that I'd seen, it was like there was no heart in it and no heart in the training. And I was like, oh man, if this is all that is, I'm going to be in trouble, And so this was the first place that I saw it was possible. And anyway, from there, mate, my time traveling wasn't done. Came back home, realized that, I couldn't quite find a role that I wanted at that point in time. And then a role popped up at a summer camp in the US. I'm like, oh well, twist my arm here. Like, oh, if I can't find anything at the moment. So I went to be a camp counselor and coach the fitness at a summer camp, for 2 months. And again, teaching young men, touching young men going through, young men problems and helping guide them, in the greater sense of life, as well as and teaching fitness there in the summer camp. They really taught me that, the things that I have to offer are very valid. So
Mm.
having conversations with people, teaching people how to meditate and breathe properly, it really was like, oh wow, okay, people really need this.
Mm.
And not only that, but like the people that I've met, are still close friends today, other camp counselors and things like that. And traveling around the US, just connecting with people and growing like that, was massive. Natasha, my wife, tends to laugh at me, being like, "Oh, you went to summer camp? Like that's hilarious." But the connections that I met, the time of my life that just helped me grow amongst that, it was a big lesson in just going with the flow of life. because that wasn't on my plan, Seth.
Mm,
Wasn't on my plan to go to a summer camp and coach the summer camp.
mm,
If you're looking from the outside in, if we were judging it, you think, weren't you strength and conditioning coach? Weren't you S&C of like a team and things like that? Isn't that where you wanted to go?
yeah.
If I was to sit outside and judge that, you'd be like, wow, that's, you've fallen from where
Mm,
you're supposed to go. But by golly, that really taught me that, life will take you in different areas to grow, and it
mm.
definitely won't be how you have pictured it. And so moving from there, mate, I jumped and moved to Canada, moved to Vancouver, mainly because I had a mate there and because you could get a working visa in Canada.
Yeah, why
And
not?
why not? And Vancouver's a gorgeous place, loved it, and just found a job at the gym there. Was working at Lululemon on the side as well. And I remember when I was getting inducted into the gym,
Yeah.
Seth, and I was going to teach S&C classes. When I was getting inducted into the gym, I looked at my phone just while they were off to get some papers. There was an email from NBA, from the NBA China, and they're like, "Hey, Kurt,
Wow.
we got your, resume from so and so and so and so and so and so." Like I didn't know these people's names,
Yeah.
but would you be interested in? We're setting up an academy, academies in China. Would you be interested in potentially coming over? And I'm sitting there about to be inducted inducted into a new job in Vancouver, and I reply back, absolutely, mate. And so
Yeah.
it had turned out that while I was doing some work at my job, Peel Thunder, the football club, the guy at the Dockers, his name's Freeman. His name's Michael Dobbin. He was traveling around the US, and he dropped my CV into when he was at one of the basketball clubs. And so,
Wow.
and I had no idea, and that's how it went up the chain, and they found me.
Little fairy
Uh,
godmother out there looking after you.
hey, look, look, mate, we all got support. We've all got angels, and yeah, we're just getting looked after like that. And so basically, I finished up, a couple of months in Vancouver later, and then I was off to China, and I was off. And I looked at a map and I saw where it was, and I'm like, oh, cool, that's going to be great. I went to a place called Uramuchi
Yeah.
in Xinjiang, right up in the northwest of China.
Right.
And I looked at it on a map. I'm like, oh, cool. It's got mountains, it's got hills. It looks very adventurous up there. Cool. I look forward to being up there.
Yeah.
But it was it's the furthest place out from civilization. It's lucky there wasn't goats in the airport, mate. It was that close. But it was right under Russia. It was next to Kazakhstan. Uh, yeah, it was
Wow.
incredible. And I reckon I met 10 foreigners there the whole time I was there for the year. And mate, that was an absolute education. So for those that don't know, Xinjiang is as probably you may have seen it in the news, for that is the area where the Uyghur people are. So the native
Yep.
Chinese people are. And they get a bit of a hard time from the Chinese
Mm.
themselves. And so it was a heavily censored place. There was army rolling up and down the streets. It's
Wow.
because they'd have a civil war like 10 years before I got there. So like tensions were high, and like the sadness was palpable. And
Yeah.
I could feel it there. And I often questioned, like, why the hell am I here? Like,
Mm.
why am I in this place? And what I felt and what came to me was, the darkest areas need light. And so
Mm.
I made my mission. So the boys that I was working with, and they were boys from probably 12 to 21 years of age, in
Mm.
the basketball there. So the NBA was looking to develop talent and eventually get them to the NBA,
Mm.
was to just bring as much love and as much light as I could
Mm.
to these boys who had nothing, pretty much.
Mm.
And so that was a massive education for me, and in giving. But not only that, being by myself in my room with only Lewayne in his family, who was the basketball coach,
Mm.
which was wonderful. We built a wonderful relationship, but with pretty much by myself, I spent a lot of time meditating, spent a lot of
Mm.
time breathing, spent a lot of time exploring yogas and things like that. And so that was a lot of deep work I was doing for myself within that time. And
Mm.
so, um, I'm sorry, mate, this is quite a long-winded answer, but
No, bro, thank you so much. What an experience. What a freaking ride.
and mate, we're almost there. We're almost there. And like, mate, I finished up there after a year. Went back home, spent more time at home, and then my mentor from meeting him in China the first time,
Mm.
called me one day. He said, Let's catch up for a coffee out at Frio." And he's like, "Look, mate, I reckon I've got an opportunity for you to go back, but it's back in China." And I was like, "Oh yeah, where is it?" He's like, "Oh, he's he's like, "Oh, it's in Shanghai." I'm like, "Oh shit, I can do
I
Shanghai."
know that.
Oh, I can do Shanghai. Shanghai's bloody easy after spending time up there in the sticks. And
Yeah.
so, look, I went back over for an opportunity at a private company over there where I didn't know how it was going to turn out, Seth.
Mm.
All I knew is, you know, I don't look back because I'm not that old now, but I look at it, mate, and I'm like, geez, I lived life pretty brave back then. Because look, I said yes, is like, I'll figure it out. The opportunity, let's see what it is. It sounds like a good opportunity. Let's go see. And
Mm.
um, and so to figure it out on the way down. And it wasn't a very good company in the end. I spent almost less than a year there over in Shanghai in that company. Their leadership was really poor. They were very fear-based humans. They were always worried that someone was going to steal something from them. They were always worried that someone was, doing them wrong. They were
Mm.
always that, and it ended up being a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think.
Yeah.
And so they were always looking for that, and they would find it anywhere they looked.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. They made life really hard for me, but in the end, that was a big lesson to me on what leadership should look like. It was a really big lesson on, how to hold my energy when, everything's going against you, everything's hard with you.
Mm.
But from that, mate, and so with that job, I was working with just like a few trail runners, a few semi-pro athletes, and things like that in that role.
Mm.
And then, I ended up finding Natasha and I got pregnant at the time, and the work was being really rough, and I was like, well, we're getting out of here. And then one of my physio mates was like, "Hey, Kurt, there's a role at the Shanghai Institute of Sport. Are you interested?" And I was like, absolutely. So it took me a while to, get them to let me go from that job, because they kind of had me by the short and curlies, mate, with having my
Mm.
work visa there.
Yeah.
But they eventually let me go, and I went to the Shanghai Institute of Sport, where I was looking after men's and women's handball, women's hockey, and baseball as well. And and so that's where I transitioned into that, which was a wonderful experience, and I was able to also consult for the women's trampoline team there as well on breathing. And
Mm.
so the national team, who recently won a couple golds and silver, because I had a mate looking after their S&C there. And also, well, in the previous job, it wasn't too bad, because I actually got to go spend 3 months with a silver medalist Olympic windsurfer, right, in an island called Haikou, and that's actually when COVID went down. So
Yeah.
that wasn't too bad getting out of the office in that sense. But so I've had a variety of experience with that, Seth, and then, as you know, mate, over the last 12 months, leaving China due to COVID, and heading to Canada,
Mm.
picked up private work with Lee Hao Tong, a professional golfer, and working with him on his physical and mental, and then landed at the Tasmanian Institute of Sport, mate, which I am now, and looking after rowing, athletics, so para athletes and individual athletes, as well as a
Mm.
bit of netball. So um, quite the array of sports, mate, and quite the experience in that sense. And I couldn't have been more luckier to experience it, Seth, because that just grew me tenfold in what I would have done had I've just
mm,
stayed home. And I would have had a very narrow view on how to view things, whether that be in profession or professionally or life, I think, mate.
mm,
Um, and especially in China, put me in situations where I had to grow and I had to adapt very quickly. And so learned how to do that. And so coming back here to Australia in this role now, it's like, you know, uh, things that I consider little things that, you know, like other coaches or other people may be like, you know, upset or annoyed about. I'm like, oh, mate, that's that's really not a big thing.
don't worry
You know,
about it. Yeah.
don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And so, yeah, that is my journey to this point, Seth. And I know it's quite a long-winded answer there, mate, but that's sort of
No,
my
it's what we're here for. That
yeah.
was incredible. And I didn't know a few of those things, Kurt. So it's it's enlightening for me, and it's an amazing journey, really. And while it might seem, I think if you have a narrow view of a career pathway, I'm sure maybe it sounds like you went off the beaten track a little bit, but in my opinion, and I think a few others, that's exactly what we're here to do. Is we're here to go on those little side missions and end up in North China while there's army rolling down the street. Man, that all of those experiences seem like they have the perfect mix of challenge, discomfort, opportunity, and learning.
Yeah, mate, they certainly did. And I just what the big thing I take away from all of that, Seth, is that I allowed life. You know, I allowed life to take me where I needed to be. And I
Mm,
wasn't, and don't get me wrong, that's definitely not perfect. But the biggest thing I pull out of that is when I get out of the way, you know, life knows where to take me. You know,
mm,
universe knows where to take me. I'm
mm,
always looked after. I'm always supported. So why would I ever worry?
mm,
You know, and you know, I found myself like in previous in you know in recent times, you know, always fall back to that sometimes of like, oh, what's next? What do I need to do? Things like that.
mm,
So, well, you always looked after.
mm,
Evidence has supported it. Once
mm,
you get out of the way, get your head out of the way, you will be guided. And yeah, and you know, we forget that sometimes, mate.
mm.
Yeah,
Oh, all the
yeah,
time. And yeah, reflecting back on my life, it's been the same. When you get out of the way and you let go and surrender to what's available. And I suppose that's not in the sense of going like throwing your hands up and say, I'll do nothing. You've still got to take opportunities, but it's trusting in those opportunities as they're presented. When those doors are opened, like you, no matter how far out those doors have seemed or how weird, I've said yes.
mm,
I landed the current job I'm in now through a summer school. So
mm.
for young people, I did youth mentoring, did a summer school for young people, landed my current role in research, which wasn't something I'd planned to do, and it's taken me. Well, it gave me a postgraduate degree. It took me over to Canada, and yeah, just so many opportunities that I travel around here in Australia, connecting with communities that I wouldn't have otherwise. It's those opportunities that present themselves if you get out of the way, say yes, and just embrace the opportunity and what's there. Ah, the gems in that are invaluable.
Yeah, man. Yep, exactly. And I like to call it inspired action toe. Oh, fuck, Seth. Sorry, man. I'm stitching you up here today. Really stitching you up here. I like to call them inspired action, Seth, because it's not taking action or doing something for the sake of doing it, just for the sake of needing to move forward, for the sake of needing a job, for the sake of it. But it's for actually when that feeling comes and you are actually inspired to move forward with it, that's when you're taking action on it, not just doing it for the sake of it. And being able to understand the difference between the two
Mm,
is a skill within itself.
mm,
And so, yeah, which has taken a lot of learning along the time. But you know, my mentor always said to me, just like almost just say yes, and
Mm,
you'll figure it out. It'll either be good or it won't, or it'll either open something else up or it won't. And
mm,
it'll be okay. Like it doesn't need to be perfect, which is sometimes I can get stuck into. And
mm,
so yeah, that was the best advice I ever had, because I actually had an experience, Seth, that after my internship in Altus, after those 3 months, they liked me. They were stoked with what I was doing and my energy and the effort I put in, but
mm,
they couldn't hire me, or they didn't really have the capacity to do that, because one, it was the US, and you know how hard it is to work in the US.
mm,
But there was the opportunity to potentially go to the Canadian Sports Institute, because they had connections there. But basically, I was so hard on myself at the time. But basically, he was like, "Yeah, write an email and go about it." But I was so in my head around like, "Oh, I just used all my money to get here. How am I supposed to get over there?" And things like that, things like that. But I killed the opportunity
mm,
and within itself. Whereas it's like, had I just said yes, and it's like you work at a coffee shop or whatever it is, or like mum and dad would have definitely supported me. You
mm,
know, it's like just say yes and you figure it out.
mm,
And the worst, the thing I always remember, Seth, the worst comes to worst is you can always go home. And
mm,
mum and dad, and, we're lucky enough to have a farm, and it's like mum and dad would always have you back on the farm to do some work and then go again.
mm.
And so that's what I remember. The worst comes to worst, you can always go home. So just say yes. But after that opportunity, I was like, I'm not missing any more of these. I'm just going to say yes and figure it out.
And maybe that's the one you needed to miss, That's the one
Yeah, yeah.
you needed to miss that for that lesson, because then the ones that came up after you certainly didn't.
No, no. I'm going to say yes to that, Seth, because otherwise I definitely wouldn't have ended up in China for sure. Had I've gone to the Canadian Institute, I probably would have stayed there for a while. And yeah, there would have been a hard time going to China, and I would have missed all the good stuff there.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Amazing, man. And I think to that metaphor of getting out of the way, again, I don't have any experience in sports, or certainly not high performance, but I imagine that that's relevant too.
mate, it's well and truly is. Like we can be our own worst enemy, and our own harshest critic, all that stuff, mate. All the words that are used for that. But we just need to allow ourselves to be present and do what we need to do. If you're a sprinter, you just need to get out of your mind and just sprint. If you're a rower, get out of your mind and just row. And basically, in the way that I work with the athletes, it's how can I find how can I give them tools to be able to help them get out of their own way, almost to a certain degree, set them and believe in themselves. And
Mm,
so giving them the tools to be present with what they're doing, that's what I'm mainly working towards. So giving them the tools to combat anxiety when a little bit of nervousness pops up because they're starting to worry about the race, and just come back to the breath, which is coming back to presence, because Michael Gervais is someone who works highly in the field, and I love his quote. It's just like high performance happens in the present moment, and that's whether
mm,
you're a rower, a sprinter, a podcaster, a coach, whatever it is. High performance happens in the present moment. So what are tools that'll help get you there, and how
mm,
can we stay there longer? And how can we find a rhythm to get us into there when we need to be in there? And and basically, how can we spend more time there? So
mm,
that's that's what I'm trying to that's what I try to do when I'm working with my athletes, and try to educate them around that and what
mm.
that feels like, because most people don't know what that feels like, Seth.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with you. Well, I didn't know what it felt like for a long time.
Mm,
It was something that was really foreign to me. And then once you start to get familiar with that and start to understand, high performance, like you said, in anything, not just in sports, but in anything, requires you to be present. Um, it's so simple but so profound, and it's one of those things that comes when you're able to get out of the mind, get into the body, get into the experience that you're having now. And I'd be really interested to know what are some of the tools that you do use with athletes to help that? Because I imagine, athletes they might be used to being in their body, working out, a strength and conditioning sense, but what what tools do you use to really get them into that present moment out of the mind?
Yeah, so I do a couple of things, Seth. And so just to give you an example, like I implement breathing and mindfulness techniques with all my athletes in every session they come into the gym. So for example, the rowers may come into the gym 3 times a week for me. And so as soon as they come in, they know to go to the recovery room. There'll be some breathing on the board. Now they're at the stage we've worked together for 6 months, so they've learned a lot of the techniques that we've done and I've implemented within them. So there'll be breathing on the board for them to go into. So they'll have 3 to 5 minutes of breathing before they come into the gym. And then they'll have 3 to 5 minutes after the gym as well. And so I'm trying to prime them before they get in, and I'm trying to help them recover on the way out.
Mm,
And so the things I'll do with them, and the main things we've spoken about, are giving them the ability to be present. So a lot of them, I'd say 50% of them struggle with anxiety, and performance anxiety. So giving them the tools to be able to slow their breath down and come back to their breath and connect to their heart, and to be able to slow themselves down and just to be present within themselves instead of allowing their mind to run wild
mm,
on what needs to be done, on what can happen, on what ifs and things like that. So first thing I'm trying to do is slow them down and control their mind, right? Because as we can all relate to in this world that gets busier with more devices, with more things like that, we're
mm,
on all the time, and it gets harder and harder to slow down. And so basically with that breathing, yeah, I'll try and slow them down, get back into the heart, get back into their body, and then move from there, that space, as opposed to trying to move from that space where they're highly strung, or that fear and anxiety base. So trying to pull them down in that sense. So that's one way to go about that. Another way is that we work on them connecting to how they, let's use rowing as an example, how they row their best.
mm,
What is it that allows them to row their best? And how can we find more of that? And that looks like, them, and I'd prescribe this for them, each day, and when they can fit it in, but sitting and feeling within themselves what it takes to row their best and what it feels like to row their best. So a bit of visualization work with
mm,
the with the full intent on them feeling the boat, on them feeling the stroke, on them feeling every aspect of it, and then feeling what it's like to win, feeling what success feels like, and pulling that energy in to help assist them, in the boat, on the erg, exactly what they're doing. And we're working in a different angle again. So we're
mm,
working on an energetic level at this point. And so there are just a couple of little aspects of how we go about it, Seth. And obviously I wish I had more, always can do more with more time.
mm,
But with the limited time I have, that is just an example of how we go about it.
mm,
Um, one of my archery athletes just shot and hit a bronze, and got a bronze on the weekend.
amazing.
And we had been doing a lot of work with her name's Sarah Hayward, around like carbon dioxide tolerance work, Seth. And so
Mm,
just quickly, it's carbon dioxide that triggers the body to breathe, not a lack of oxygen.
mm-hmm,
Right? And so if we take that principle, we have sensors in the body where our tolerance, our carbon dioxide tolerance, where our carbon dioxide will build up in the body, and it'll hit our tolerance, and it'll be like, bang, you need to breathe.
mm-hmm,
You need to breathe. And so we can actually train that. So we can make that tolerance larger and larger.
mm,
And when we do that, when we stretch that out, you don't have to breathe as much, and you
mm-hmm,
become more economical with your breathing.
mm-hmm,
And so with her, we put a large emphasis on, one, bringing her stress down, and two, building her carbon dioxide tolerance. so that she didn't have to breathe as much. And if she didn't have to breathe as much and could be more economical with her breathing and could keep her heart rate down with fewer breaths, then when she was shooting and holding that arrow,
Mm-hmm.
she actually didn't have to breathe for a longer period of time, which could keep her stiller
Mm.
without her heart rate having to go up and
Mm-hmm.
having those permutations through the body.
Mm-hmm.
So the less she breathed, the more still she could be, and her body could handle that. And so she came back from competition this week and was just saying that was one of the big things that she noticed, and she shot her best in a long time. So it's those little things that if I was a pure S&C coach, it'd
You'd
just be
miss that.
all about lifting heavier, or whatever it is, and
Yeah.
they're the things that make me really proud about the work that we do.
Oh man, the holistic nature of it all is so important, and just perfectly illustrated by the example you gave there. It's like, instead of going straight to the body, let's look at the breath, and let's look at training other aspects of our being, which we can do. As you mentioned earlier on, it's training the mental, the physical, the spiritual, the whole lot, looking holistically at dropping stress levels, looking at what's happening outside of even the training arena, the sporting arena, to say, how can we look at optimizing other aspects of your life so that you're more likely to drop into that presentness and perform your best. And the examples that you've just illustrated, they're applicable for anybody, really, anybody for anything. And going back to what you said earlier, high performance isn't just for athletes. The everyday person can be a high performing person. In fact, I would say that most people want to be a high performing person and should be high performing people, because that moment, what's interesting is, and in my experience, and I'd love to hear if your experience on this too, is when I do my best at something, it actually feels effortless. It doesn't feel like I'm trying hard. It actually feels like I'm not. It almost feels easy.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that's coming back to just being, I think, Seth, to a certain degree, mate. And when we're in flow, we're just being and enjoying what we're doing like that and being present with what we're doing. I think it does come easy, mate.
Mm,
I think we make things harder than they need to be, Seth, 1,000%, Um, and it could be, I have plenty of examples from my own life that I can tell you, mate. We make things a
mm,
lot harder than they need to be. But just being, and when you are in that being and flow and inspiration, that's when it happens, in that
mm,
presence, mate. And a lot of that is like when you are present, you're out of your head and you just are purely enveloped in what you're doing.
mm,
And when you're inspired by that, Seth, and when you love that as well, it just happens effortless, right? Whether
mm,
that be a challenging task or not. So
mm,
I think you're spot on.
mm. And the other thing that I've really connected with recently is do hard stuff, and do hard
Mm,
stuff every day, because eventually the hard stuff's going to come to your door. You can try and avoid it as much as you want. And this is why I love training, and why I've stuck with particularly physical training, because it can, as long as you push yourself, it can be fucking hard. And I I want that challenge. I want that discomfort. I seek it out. It's why I take cold showers. It's why I do long stints of breath work. It's why I get in the gym, because it's uncomfortable. And on the other side of that is a freedom, and a freedom not just of how you feel physically, like physically I feel better after all those things, but a freedom of mind, knowing that whatever else comes my way, I have a capacity to deal with it, because I know what discomfort feels like, and I trust myself to get through it, and I know I'm capable of getting through
mm. Spot on, mate. Spot on. And like the biggest example I would use of that, Seth, is that of just living in China, Seth. and the capacity of what it's done to change my outlook on things, on the way we do things over here. And like, because something as simple as setting up Wi-Fi, Seth, was
mm,
not simple, not simple at all. Something as simple as getting a mobile number or whatever was not simple.
mm,
And so, like, those sort of things in life in general, were hard. And now coming back here, it's like, oh, we've got it's so everything's easy, everything's so
mm.
simple. But yeah, everything's so simple there, Tal. And you're spot on. And mate, it's the coldest water I've ever been in down here in Tas, mate. So you're going to enjoy it when you come bring yourself down here. So you'll definitely get some discomfort.
Man, I can't wait. It's on the list. My partner's been nagging to go to Tassie for ages, and it's just working out when it's going to line up. But in saying that, like I said to you offline, there's an opportunity that we could be down there very, very soon. So looking forward to that. Kurt, man, I appreciate so much you taking the time to jump on here, and what you do with athletes and absolute weapons like myself is just incredible. The holistic nature of it is so important, and something that I feel like it's getting more airtime, but it certainly should be front and center.
And Seth, thank you for having me on, mate. I've always enjoyed chatting with you, bud. And even though I had to beg to train you, a couple of months ago, but that's a whole podcast within itself. But something that something that you touched on before was just rang so true, mate, and has been the underpinning of my life. Was that the personal development, with that you touched on, was like, when you work on yourself, you become a better athlete, or you become a higher performing individual. That's been the theme of my life. I've always that I would put that above anything else that I've done. Is I would always be working on myself, with regardless of what I'm doing, even over what I'm doing, because I know that underpins everything that I do. So I've worked with the mentor that I have for about 12 years now, once a month for 12 years, consistently working on that, purely working on the energetics, and the spiritual aspect of my life that underpins everything I do. Um, and it was nagging on me for the last 5 minutes, Seth, with you being like, with that's what you said. And so that to me underpins life. And so you can never do too much work on yourself, or you can never look inward enough to find that high performance. And so with the work that I'm doing, I'd love to do deeper stuff, but it's just the capacity of where I'm in at the moment that we can't quite go there. But that is why the stuff I do with my private clients is so impactful and powerful, because we unpack those sort of things. And so, yeah, you were spot on, mate, when you hit that. And yeah, I was just trying to find that what you said on there, mate, for a while there. But
Got it.
yeah, appreciate you having me on, mate. It's been wonderful.
Absolutely, brother. Much love.
Thanks, Ledge.